My name is Maria, and this is my story. I came to Canada many years ago with nothing but $10 and my 2-year-old son. I immigrated from Portugal because Canada was a place full of opportunities. Essentially, I wanted to give my young son a better life, one that he deserved and one that I knew I could not give him in Portugal. Although Canada was blooming with opportunities, I came to Canada without knowing how to speak, write, or understand English. In a place where you do not know how to communicate with anyone and have no family, it is a frightful situation. Nevertheless, I kept reminding myself why I did this. I wanted a life for my son and I. It was my responsibility to provide him with necessities to live a successful life, no matter what the cost was going to be, because that's what a mother does for her children. As I mentioned, I had no family here in Canada, but I knew that acquiring the language was imperative for me to find a job. In view of the fact that my son was only 2, I learned how to speak English by watching Sesame Street. I could not find work right away, as no one would care for my son. Looking back on my experience, sometimes I laugh because it was Big Bird that taught me an enormous part of my vocabulary. It is something that I will never forget as I preserve to learn the English language with limited resources. As the years went by, I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work for a good company. In addition, I became involved with someone who I thought I could spend the rest of my life with. In 1997, I was blessed with my second son. He could not have been more perfect. I felt that I had it all, my 2 boys and someone who I felt could be my life partner. However, not everything happens the way that I would like them to. Days after my second son was born, his father and I split. He had become physically and verbally abusive, and I made the decision to ask him to leave, as it was not a good environment for my children. I knew that making this decision was going to hurt me. Was determined to give my children a life they deserved. From personal experience, being a parent is difficult, but having to be both mom and dad for children is even harder. I would drop them off at their babysitters in the morning to go to work, pick up my children, and then go home to make dinner. As my children grew up, so did their needs and necessities. I had to make time and arrangements for their extracurricular activities, parent-teacher interviews, and taking the weekends for tournaments and sports events. It was exhausting most days, and most times I wondered how long I was going to do it alone. A few years passed, and I became romantically involved with another man. Unfortunately, it turned out the same way as the first encounter. It was then I decided that relationships and marriage is not meant for everyone. I proudly accepted that I was meant to be a good mother to my children. With this exception, I put no attention or focus on finding the right person. I continued to be the mother I always was for my children because their well-being always came first. Although my heart longed for a partner, a part of my heart became heavily protected due to its few and sad encounters. If there is one lesson I have learned, it is that to enjoy the good moments because you do not know when it's going to end. I received news that my company was going to close down. In that moment, I was not sure I was going to do. So many thoughts were going through my mind. Again, I had to do what was best for my family. I quickly got a job as a waitress and worked endless hours to make ends meet. I remember leaving my boys early in the morning and coming home in the late hours of the night. As part of my felt and still feels guilty for not spending as much time as I should have with my boys. However, I need to provide for them, and that was more important to me. One morning, my niece from Portugal called and told me that my sister had passed away from breast cancer. After receiving the news, I was confused on how to feel. Maybe it was guilt because I hadn't been back home to see her, or sadness from having to accept that my sister was no longer with us, or maybe it was regret because there was so many things left unsaid. I did not think that it could get any worse, but luck was not on my side. About 24 hours after receiving the news about my sister, my niece called again saying that my mom passed away. At this moment, I remember collapsing and woke up in the hospital. My son was right next to me and said that I lost consciousness, and I was rushed to the hospital. I had asked the doctors to give me clearance and permission to fly back home to the hospital. The doctors could not grant the clearance due to my psychological state. Consequently, I was able to say goodbye to my mom and sister and the way I would have liked to. During my darkest moments, I thought I could have turned to a close friend who I began to have feelings for. When I got into contact with him, I uncovered that he had been in a relationship with another this whole time. The feeling of building walls from men continued, and then that was the last time I heard from him. Although I was experiencing heartache in many forms, I was a firm believer that some good would come from all of this heartache. 1 year later, I finally was able to go back home to say goodbye the way I wanted to a year ago. As I stood in front of their tombstones, I said everything I felt for the past year, how much I missed them, how much I wish I could take them back, and how most importantly, how much I love them. Upon returning to Canada, I became employed with a cleaning company for a number of police stations in downtown Toronto. I was introduced to a good people that serve our city and that built relationships with men and women. In 2017, the company went out of business and a new company, TBM, was going to take over. Upon hearing the news, I was concerned about my position due to the reconstruction of the company. Along with hearing the news about this new company, I received a phone call regarding my dad. He was becoming sick and having difficulty living on his own. My mind was scattered everywhere. I needed to find out what was happening with my position, but my dad was suffering and needed assistance as soon as possible. The feeling of your heart being pulled in two different places is definitely something I experienced. When it came time to decide which situation I was going to resolve first, I thought about the regret I felt about my sister and my mother. I could wait for another loved one to pass. I could not. I flew out to Portugal to do everything necessary in order to provide assistance my dad required. Although I was worried about my life back in Canada, I knew coming back to Portugal was the right decision. After 2 weeks, I came back home to find a number of workers no longer retained in their jobs. I was one of those workers, and I felt like I had hit another dead end. The fear of not knowing how I was going to pay the bills, how to pay the rent, assist my son to finish his course in school, and how I was going to put food on the table was constantly on my mind. As my youngest son was only months away from graduating from his program, I wondered how we were going to survive the next few months without any income. I prayed every day and night for a way to resolve this issue. One morning I went to the TBM office inquiring about any position that they could be offering. I spoke to the owner and he was really impressed with my extensive experience and qualifications. He asked me to forward my resume and called me later on that day. I was interviewed on a Wednesday and I would begin my employment with them the very next day. I'm very thankful for TBM for the opportunity that they have given me. They demonstrate their respect towards their employees by offering benefits, competitive wages, and their guidance. Since my first day, the owners have been nothing but kind to me. They have been understanding of my situation and have offered ways to provide a better life for my son and I. Working at TBM has showed me that a workplace resembles a family. Everyone takes care of one another with respect. I enjoy working with everyone, and I feel that TBM has given me once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that I will forever be thankful for. I would like the people who have taken the time to read, to hear my story, to remember this. Success is not based on how quickly you can attain it. It is based on the steps that you took to attain it. I would like to take a moment to thank the women that have and are both parents for their children. To the women who work all day long just to see the smile on your children's faces. To the women who have sacrificed anything and everything that they could to give your children a better future. My children are the reason why I continue to fight for a better tomorrow. Everyone says that superheroes are not real, but these women are examples of superheroes because of their extraordinary motivation to continue to do what they do for the love of their children.